complaint about last week's video, let me transfer you to the complaint department. Please hold. Hello, this is the complaint department. Customer service representative for Betamax Blocker is currently not available. Please hold for the next 10 years and have a great day. Love my new phone. That'll keep him busy for a while. If you collect VHS tapes like I do, you're surely familiar with the work of 20th Century Fox Video. These wonderful covers and designs of various classic films. Their covers often use purple and gold, other interesting colors there, to make really neat designs that look wonderful in a VHS display. And things like this leaflet I just showed you are very nostalgic to me because I was just a kid when those were new, and I remember seeing them in stores and purchasing them for my collection and whatnot. And someday I'll show you my 20th Century Fox Video collection. But I thought for today, let's peel back time a little bit and look not at the videos of the 90s, but those of the 80s. Specifically, and you can probably see them here on the piles to my right, the CBS Fox release. CBS Fox videos today. Here's the Star Wars one. We're not going to talk about Star Wars today, but you can see the video there. They're really neat, the logo and the really cool spines. Most of the spines had kind of a uniform design with white text, but some important movies like Star Wars got more of a stylized logo there. And I thought they were such a cool design, and there were so many great movies in that series that I could talk about the ones I have, and maybe if you have a collection, you could share it with me too. So for today, I figured we'll do the 30s and 40s first. We'll get the really old guys out of the way and kind of work our way up in later videos. So the first film from the CBS Fox CBS Fox line I want to share with you today, 1938's Adventures of Robin Hood, starring Errol Flynn as Robin Hood and the wonderful Olivia de Havilland as Maid Marian. This isn't my favorite version of Robin Hood, but I like that it's in color, which for a film in 1938 is still kind of a rarity. Some great archery action, and this kind of helped to shape a lot of Robin Hood films to come. I think this was probably the most influential one. So it's nice to have it, and it's always a fun watch. Great supporting cast, Basil Rathbone, Eugene Pallett, and so on there. Most of these videos were printed in the mid-80s, 1984, 1985. Some are a little bit newer. Second one up today. Everyone's favorite, Casablanca. Now, Casablanca's had quite a few home media releases over the years. In fact, I would argue, put that down there, that it's probably had more than just about any other major film. It gets a new DVD or Blu-ray or whatever released pretty much every year. I've shown some of them in earlier videos I have, but have some other cool Casablanca videos. This was the 50th anniversary cassette here. Someday I'll talk more about that. Here's the much maligned colorized copy. This was from about 1989, that kind of thing. And it's different. It's strange to watch it in color. I've seen Casablanca in theaters. I've watched it on, many different formats and stuff. It's such a great film, you can enjoy it almost any way, but it's still kind of weird to see it in color. But let's focus on this 1984 video release. No frills here, no special additional features or anything like that. The box does make a big deal about it being in black and white. There's little bars throughout both sides of the box that say it's an original black and white, which surprised me because this colorized copy I just showed you wouldn't come along for several years yet. But what can I say about Casablanca that hasn't been said by people much smarter than I am? It's such a great film, and if you haven't seen it, you really need to. It's so ingrained in our pop culture that you almost have to watch it. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find people who genuinely dislike Casablanca too. There's something in there for everybody. Always a good choice. Let's talk about one that's a great film that people don't talk about too much. Here is from 1943, the Ernst Lubitsch directed, Don Amici starring in Heaven Can Wait. Actually, one of the films that influenced Up, like the scene with Carl Fredricksen's neckties, is based on a similar scene in this film. But this one is a little bit newer. It's from about 1990 instead of the mid-80s. And has a nice stylized spine there. You can see kind of using the font from the film. Really fun romantic comedy, also in color, kind of like an age progression comedy, looking at Don Amici's character's life from when he was a boy up till when he was an old man, and finally when he passes away. And the whole crux of the film is, did he live a life so bad he deserves to burn forever in hell, or was he actually a good person who just made some silly and frivolous romantic choices? It's a really fun movie. My second favorite Ernst Lubitsch movie. The Shop Around the Corner is my first, but great film. Criterion has a nice copy of this, Blu-ray and DVD. I don't have that, unfortunately. I just have this video, but I'm still grateful to have it. In color, a lot of fun, a lot of good supporting actors and actresses in that. Definitely an underrated bit. From 1946, we've got the adaptation of Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep. We're back to Bogey. Did Casablanca, now we're at The Big Sleep. I should note that this is the 1946 theatrical cut. The Big Sleep is famous today for there being two alternate versions. There was a 1945 pre-release, and then there was the 1946 general release. And they are different, not so much in terms of presentation, but in terms of the edit, in terms of there were new scenes in 1946 one, not 1945 one, and so on. There are whole websites devoted to finding and detailing every difference. We're not going to get into that today. But this DVD, which features both cuts of the film, is in my opinion the best, I should say, I guess, resource to use for looking at The Big Sleep, because you can watch them both, and there's even a featurette that compares them. This was long before that DVD I just showed you, so it's strictly the 1946 one. One of the movies that got me into film noir. The plot is extremely complicated and difficult, but that's typical of any Raymond Chandler work, really. And there's a lot of time spent on innuendo and all these very sort of spicy but not offensive exchanges between Bogey and Bacall, involving racehorses or involving them making a prank call to the police station and so on. It's a fun movie to watch. Some people find it frustrating, I get that, but definitely worth a watch. So we've gone kind of in the classic, overlooked. So here's from 1947, The Farmer's Daughter. Today most famous for being Loretta Young's Oscar winner. This is from 1947. For a long time, The Farmer's Daughter was not available on DVD or Blu-ray, and VHS tapes like this were about the only way you could get to see it. It's not really a film that's much discussed or even much liked, but I always found it to be really fun. It fits in with those political comedies from the late 40s and early 50s. The Senator Was Indiscreet, A Foreign Affair, those sorts of films, in that it talks about the issues politicians face, but it does it in a very light, fun way. They deal with serious topics, but they add a lot of comedy in there to kind of balance it out. This film, of course, being all about mudslinging in elections, being about people who aren't competent running for office or winning office, or who they have to betray and that sort of thing. But it's also a feel-good film with a happy ending. It is a good movie, and a lot of people, just because they dislike Loretta Young or dislike her Oscar win, tend to kind of chuck it to the side. But it deserves a watch. Kind of a fun one there. Ethel Barrymore is great in this. Charles Bickford, also very good. Fun movie. I wish more people watched it. So, we talked about colorization briefly earlier with Casablanca. Well, it turns out there were colorized films in the 80s. I even have a colorized VHS tape of Topper, which was the first film ever colorized. And here is the White Heat in color. And CBS Fox marketed it in color. Unlike the Casablanca video where, the information about it being in color is teeny tiny fine print, they were very, very open about it. On the front and on the side. Not so much on the back, but I love White Heat. I love James Cagney, so White Heat's one of my favorite performances of his. Great prison movie, great gangster drama. He is incredible in it, as completely psychotic, exactly the way he needs to be. More mature than his role in something like The Public Enemy, though. Great movie. The color is pretty washed out. It's very, very primitive. This was colorized in 1986 or 87, so it's, by today's standards, it's not really up to snuff. But it is fun to watch, and I think the movie's better in black and white, but I don't mind watching it in color every now and and then too, just for a kind of a different experience. Pretty interesting stuff. So that does it for the 30s and 40s single video releases. I thought now let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the 2 VHS releases there. As many of us know, longer films or miniseries or anything like that came on 2 videos. You got the extra wide box there. This is a movie I talked about briefly in my Universal Cinema Classics Part 2 video. That's Since You Went Away from 1944. This was a huge movie in 1944, and honestly I'm kind of surprised it didn't get the Best Picture that year. But Going My Way is more of a feel-good, fun thing, so they probably wanted that instead. But Since You Went Away focuses on the toll that war takes at home. Like a lot of movies from this vintage, it's not subtle at all. It's very aggressive with its messages, and there are way too many characters, and it takes itself so seriously. There's very little humor in it. Even some films that dealt with similar themes, like The Best Years of Our Lives, do a good job of injecting humor in there at different points. And Since He Went Away, I just found to be so pompous. You know, it's like, this really isn't enjoyable. Interestingly enough, the box, as you could probably see already, is blue in place of black. It's the only blue one I have. I don't know if there was a reason for this. Video 1990, so a little bit newer. Maybe that's why. Has the stylized side there and whatnot. I'm glad I have it, and I don't mind watching it every now and then, but it's never going to be a favorite of mine. So something actually, we'll do this one first. We'll save that one. Here's another double pack, one that's more familiar to many of you, I'm sure. 1965 Best Picture, The Sound of Music. Do a dear. Sorry, I'm not going to sing, I'm just singing. You know, I have the deluxe DVD, so I don't really need this in my collection, but it is fun to have it nonetheless. Not a big favorite of mine, really. I think Rodgers and Hammerstein did some better ones, but yeah, a lot of people swear by this movie, and it is fun to watch. It's a feel-good kind of thing. I don't really have that much to say about it. I figured I'll save this one for last, because it's actually still sealed. It's very chic, very recherche to have sealed VHS tapes in your collection, and I have some. I tend to open most of mine so I can watch them, but this one I did keep sealed. It's in pretty ratty shape, but that's Patton, 1970s Best Picture winner. Love George C. Scott, Anatomy of a Murder, The Changeling. I'll show you that side. Good stuff there. He's really good in this. Kind of a ponderous film, and not historically accurate in all regards, especially in like the use of the tanks and things that they use. But a good film to watch. George C. Scott's performance makes it. He deserved that Oscar. Quite good stuff. So I looked through our 30s and 40s. Talked about our double packs. So let's talk about everyone's favorite cinematic hero, Bond. James Bond. So I love Bond movies. I've never done a video about James Bond. I think I really need to, because I absolutely love James Bond. I have for the past, 20, 25 years. Some of the James Bond not copies of the novels. These are the original Ian Fleming novels. But here they are with like artwork from the movies. They were reprinted as tie-ins, even though in both of these books cases they really don't have much to do with the adaptation. But I love Bond movies, and I'm very nostalgic for Bond VHS tapes. We'll talk about our CBS Fox boys last. Here's an example from, this is the very late 80s. CBS Fox did these really cool ones. They have the gold bar at the top. They kind of have the hand-drawn collage artwork. This is for You Only Live Twice. Can't tell. Those are really neat. A lot of them come with Pink Panther cartoons as bonus features, which I thought was kind of odd. From the early 90s, CBS Fox did versions here. Have like extra artwork, supposed to look like the movies. That's pretty cool. And the ones I'm most nostalgic for when it comes to Bond on VHS from like the late 90s, early 2000s, these releases here. They have a quote from the film on the back, lots of previews and cool things on them. I like those a lot, but let's go back before any of these existed. And let's look at the ones CBS Fox put out in the 80s. Here's very first one, Dr. No. Going to Jamaica under the mango tree there. I like Dr. No. It's a great movie. It definitely sets the stage for Bond. It's not the best. You know, they would improve on things, but for a first outing, it works pretty darn well, I gotta say. Jack Lord as Felix, Ursula Andress as the ever-alluring Honey Rider. This tape, 1984, pretty cool stuff. Now, we've had Bond restored many times for DVD and Blu-ray and so on, and so this tape looks its age and feels its age to watch, but it's still fun to see it on grainy VHS sometimes. Of course, we can't talk about Dr. No without talking about one of the most famous and important Bond films of all time. Dun dun. Goldfinger was the Bond movie that made Bond a worldwide phenomenon, no question of that. And it is a really good Bond film. You can't argue its influence on generations of filmmakers and reshaping action and spy movies. I've seen Goldfinger in theaters too. Very impressive to see on the big screen. But that being said, as much as I love it, it has aged, particularly Bond's interactions with Pussy Galore. Would not fly too far today, I don't think. There's some pretty cringy stuff going on there, and some of the effects shots, you know, look primitive even by the early 60s and mid-60s, I guess, 1964. Yeah, but still, you have to have it in your Bond collection, no question of that, and I'm so glad I do. Let's jump ahead and talk Roger Moore a couple times, then we'll actually go backwards. Another one from the CBS label I have is Moonraker. Where are you? Moonraker is one that I've always gone back and forth on. Someday I have to do a Bond ranking, I guess. You know, I like the science fiction angle. I think Roger Moore is actually pretty good in it, but some of the stuff, the inflatable gondola that he can drive around Venice, the fact that everyone seems to use the same space laser, even though, you know, there's like the enemy faction, the US Space Marines, and so it's just a little too fanciful for me. But, yeah, it has its moments, I guess. Probably my least favorite Roger Moore Bond. Speaking of Roger Moore, CBS Fox didn't just release films, they released TV specials and things like that too. Here's Happy Anniversary 007. This was a little featurette Roger Moore hosted for the upcoming release of Timothy Dalton's Bond debut, The Living Daylights, and he talks about that film in here. It's just a nice little retrospective of Bond, a little clip show thing. It's nice they got Roger Moore to host it. You know, it's available on DVD and probably on Blu-ray too. I have it on my Living Daylights DVD, so just an interesting little curio I thought I'd throw in there. And finally, this will be a nice segue to the upcoming Part 2 sometime in the future. Many of their VHS releases on CBS Fox came in these little slidey trays that come out. It's like a bigger box. Here's my only Bond film I have in that style. I have some other trays like this, but the only Bond movie I have is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. We have all the time in the world. George Lazenby's only one. As a kid, I hated this one. It was my least favorite one. It wasn't until I was in probably my early mid-20s when I kind of reevaluated it and realized it's actually a really good movie. Lazenby is okay. The fact that he's dubbed is a big detraction because the dubbing is really poor, at least in my eyes, the dubbing is really poor. But he has some really good scenes, especially at the end, and I can see why No Time to Die took so much from this movie and tried to copy its tone and whatnot, because this feels very modern. It is totally different than, you know, the movies that came right before it, like Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and it's very different from those that came after, like Diamonds Are Forever. So I like a lot of it. It's really grown on me. Now it'll probably be in my top 10 Bonds. Not a perfect film, but one that every Bond fan really needs to see. And I think if George Lazenby had had a chance to be in a couple more, he would have grown into the part and he would have been really good at it. I think it's just the fact that he did this weird one-off movie kind of wrecked all that. And that will do us for CBS Fox videos for today. Please do leave a comment on any of the movies or special features that you found to be interesting. And until next time, my friends, have a good week. Go out there and watch a good movie. And as always, thank you for watching.